Right, here we go.
All right, I'm going to admit people then. Yes. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Good to see some familiar faces, folks I haven't seen in a while. Welcome back. We'll get started in just a minute as folks settle in.
Still admitting people, so welcome. Good to see all of you.
Hello, everyone.
Awesome. The way our invitations are set up for folks to attend community calls, we don't know who will be coming because it's just an open invitation to the whole community. Maybe that's obvious to you, but each time we start a community call, I'm like, I wonder who this topic will be interesting for, or who has put this on their calendar. And so then it's like really heartwarming as the faces come in, like, oh, my community is here. It's great to see your faces. Should we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am calling to you from San Francisco in the Bay Area, and it's really wonderful to be here. I have my colleague, Jenyng. Jenyng, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jenyng, and I'm also in the Bay Area, not too far from Victoria, maybe 2 hours north in Windsor, and I'm really glad to be here today with you all.
It is such an honor that you chosen time to come and be with us. And look, we have 23 people so far in the community and more to come. But before we go even further, I want you to take a look around and see who is in this space, who is here, who's in the room. And just from what you've seen in the room, I want you to just write down in the chat maybe some data that you're gathering just from seeing who's in the room. And if you just go ahead and write it in the chat, and also write your name and what brought you here. Why are you here? You could be spending your time with anything else, but you chose to be here.
May I say something? I'm sorry, I can't use the chat. It never works for me. So I'm here. My name is Gail, and I'm at Gilchrist.
Thank you so much, Gail, for voicing that and voicing your accessibility needs. If anyone else has other accessibility needs that pertain to the chat, please speak up in the way that Gail did, or raise your hand and I will call on you if need be. See that I'm seeing many faces. I've seen other community calls and many folks from various retreat centers. 15 white women. I don't see a lot of masculine folks. 3 males. Bernadette Roroff, Common Value. I see primarily women, mostly white. White passing. I'm Sonia of Southern Dharma. Yeah. We've done a lot of work this past year around racial justice and healing. Suzanne. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. No Black men. Okay. What else? Okay. Oh, you can, here we go. We have one more. Yes, please continue to, I'm noting who's not in the room. Great, great. Who's not in the room? Let's go there, Suzanne. Who's not in the room? Thank you, Diana. Who's not in the room? Black men and Latin men. Yeah, who else is not in the room? Millennials. Gen X and older, maybe some millennials. Yeah. Who else is not in the room? Black men and BIPOC representatives. BIPOC meaning Black, Indigenous, and people of color, including Latinx, Asian Americans, etc. I'm wondering about assumptions I'm making about folks' identity based on what I see. Great. Beautiful. What else? Maybe one more. People who openly affiliate with religious faith who are not Christian, few Buddhist faith backgrounds. Excellent. Okay. This is great. So we're going to stop it there. And let me just say that people have made the time to learn today. This is what you're seeing. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. So I love that one, all of them, but I want to start with the one that Diana put up, which was, I'm wondering about assumptions I'm making about who's, about folks who identity-based. I'm sorry. Let me just tell you, I'm going through a thing with my glasses right now. I think it's time for the bifocals to come in. So you're going to see me kind of going like this and going like this and going like this as we're working together, because these glasses, I need to go to the doctor. Anyway, you said, Diana, you said, I wonder about assumptions I'm making about folks' identity based on what I see. Yes, we did not want to make assumptions about what we were seeing. So that's why when we started the Racial Healing Initiative, we decided to do a survey and to ask people to answer the data for themselves so that then we can analyze the data and decide on the strategy that we're going to be taking. We're going to dive into that data and we can show you what we found. And a lot of things that we found are actually very similar to some of the things that you already mentioned. So, but before we go there, I want to, let's do a little common ground, because the final thing that I read too was that people were saying, like, you all made time to come here and to learn from each other. So if you share common ground with the person that says this, you, we're going to blank all of our screen, like go off screen. And if you're having accessibility around being able to even go off screen, you could just put your hand like this. And then when it's time, if you agree with what they said, you go like this. Okay. But if you are able to turn off your camera, then you turn it off. Yeah. I see people are turning it off. Great. And then I'm going to say a statement. And if you agree with that statement, then you open your camera. Okay. And then after that, one other person in the room will pick up and say, I share common ground with people who have been in a retreat center for over 20 years. And then whoever's been in part of a retreat center, but in administrative or in any capacity, will open their cameras. Okay, we're good? Let's try it. I'll start and then we'll see who goes. I am Victoria, and please say your name so we can get to know you, and you say your first name so we can make it short. My name is Victoria, and I share common ground with people who believe retreat centers are a place for healing and restoration. Fantastic. Then somebody else picks it up and asks a question. Oh, I can pass it to someone. Why don't I do that? You pass it to someone, that'll make it easier. Jack, I'm passing it to you.
Okay, I see retreat centers. I'm Jack. I see retreat centers as a place of challenge and conversion.
And you can take your time to let people kind of turn their cameras off and then be able to turn it on. And who do you pass it to, Jack?
I pass it to Jennifer Stoll.
Thank you, Jack. I was just about to say, if I had went on camera and spoke, how much I agree with exactly what you said about retreat centers. So I echo Jack. Yes, I'm Jennifer Stoll at Commonweal out in California, Salinas. And I agree that retreat centers are places of challenge and conversion possibilities, and are places of healing, like acupressure points on the planet for this work of racial healing and so much else. Really good to be here. Oh, passing it on to Kirsten.
My name is Kirsten. I'm at Gilchrist Retreat Center in Three Rivers, Michigan. And I share common ground with people who feel that we can learn how to be better humans by observing the wild.
Mm. Mhm.
Oh, and I will hand it off to Jenyng.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm Jenyng. I share common ground with retreat centers that have experienced the challenges of this messy work and actually fucking up. Pardon my French. And I'll hold off here. And I will pass it to Deborah.
Hi, I'm Deborah, also from Gilchrist in Three Rivers, Michigan. This is a good question, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. Can I pass to Bernadette?
Hi, I'm Bernadette. I'm from Cranaleith in Philadelphia, and I share common ground with people who see retreat centers as opportunities for conversation. And I will pass along to Jean.
Jean, can you unmute your, yeah.
I share common ground with retreat centers that are in transition, holding new visions for who they could become. And I'm going to pass it off to Maureen.
Thank you, Jean. I'm Maureen, and I hold common ground with octogenarians who have been able to return to retreat centers via Zoom.
Mm. Fantastic. Thank you all. Let's leave it there. This is a perfect place to put a pause on it. So you can see we have a lot in common, and I'm excited that we are able to be here together in dialogue and holding our own virtual retreat center space, right? Because that's really what we're doing. So again, I want to share that we're part of the Racial Healing Initiative, and we have actually several of the core consultants that are part of the team that are here. Marissa, will you wave your hand? Yeah. And Marissa is also a board member at Gilchrist, no, at
Kirkridge.
Cokeridge, and it was with a K, and then it just kind of blank out. And then Arlene is, raise your hand, Arlene, and Arlene is with Port Henmaten. Yes. So is there anyone else on the team that's here that I'm not seeing?
Lauren.
Where is Lauren? I think
There
I've
she
seen
is.
Lauren.
I'm just not camera ready.
Oh, hey, Lauren.
Yeah.
And Lauren has been involved with the Retreat Center collaboration in the early stages. So welcome, Lauren. Anyway, my friend, so the Racial Healing Initiative is an initiative that was funded through the Kellogg Foundation, supported by Fetzer and Commonweal. And the intention of the Racial Healing Initiative is to create a process for individual and community to be restored to wholeness, to repair the damage that have been caused by racism, and help to transform the structure in society that's really keeping people separate, and that are not allowing space for us to learn our history and to move towards a collective future in which all people belong. And that's really what the Racial Healing Initiative is about. So when we started this process, we said, okay, we need to know what's happening in retreat centers. And then in addition to that, see which retreat centers feel that they're ready to start and to deepen this work in partnership with us. Of course, we didn't receive all of the funding that we originally applied for. And so we ended up selecting a small number of retreat centers around, when we put out the call, 14 retreat centers said that they were interested in partnering with us and in being part of the process. That was 14 retreat centers. At the same time, we have another initiative that's coming on board with the RCC called ILALI. Ben, can you say the name of what ILALI stands for?
I can. Yes, I can. It is the Innovative Learning and Living Institute. And I have another question here too. Can you turn your camera back on?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we can't see you. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Can you say the name again, please?
So ILALI is I-L-A-L-I, and it stands for the Innovative Learning and Living Institute. ILALI.global is the website.
Great. So we had those two, that initiative coming on board, and we decided, okay, let's spread the resources a little bit across the retreat center. So wherever these two retreats, wherever ILALI was going to be based, we decided not to work with those retreat center. So ILALI is going to be working with two retreat center. I'm not sure if it's known yet, so I'm not going to mention it now, but I would say that we chose not to work with those two retreat centers. So we're going to be working with the other 12 retreat centers. And we are starting with a phase 1 pilot, and we're in the process of meeting with those retreat centers and finding out their stakeholders, sending out letters, etc. And then and also having further deeper listening sessions so that we don't make assumptions, so that each curriculum is designed specifically for the retreat centers that we're working with. And then we're going to be working with another set of retreat centers in phase 2 and another group of retreat centers in phase 3. The intention and the hope is that we'll be able to continue to gather resources to be able to bring on more retreat centers as we move forward. But that's where we are right now. In terms of the who responded, we had 25 retreat centers, like I said, that responded. Out of those retreat centers, 2 of them did not fully complete their application or the survey. And then out of those, like I said, 14 said that they were interested in participating. In terms of the regions that was represented in the surveys, we have 14 of them that came from the eastern states. 5 came from the Midwestern state, 3 from Western states, and 1 from the Midwest, from Canada, Ontario, and 1 from Indonesia. So unfortunately, yeah, this initiative is mostly focused on retreat centers in the United States. Okay, I'm going to be speaking a lot for a little bit, and then you're going to have an opportunity to break off into smaller groups and have some conversations. And we can digest some other data together. But this was really an opportunity. The surveys was an opportunity for leaders of the retreat center to state what's happening in their community and to have an opportunity to reflect on what they're doing regarding, organizational identity, participant demographic, racial equity work that they've been doing. And a lot of the retreat centers that participated actually share with us that this was really an opportunity for them to really look at some questions that they themselves haven't even been asking. And that this instrument was really helpful for them. Some of the retreat centers also said that this was really a difficult survey to fill out because it had a lot of questions like, what is the composition of your board? What is the composition of your volunteers? What is the composition of your staff and administration? What is their racial, gender identity and composition? Let's see, who are your stakeholders? So we were asking those kinds of questions, and some people haven't thought about it or found it really difficult given all of the challenges that you currently have and are currently managing in terms of your retreat centers. But it's really, again, going back to not making assumptions, it's really important that when we're trying to create an intervention, that we really look at the whole landscape so that we can all really buy into that intervention and not make it based on assumptions or create something that's not going to be beneficial. And so I will continue to share more about the data. When we looked at the average capacity per retreat centers, we noticed that the average capacity for guests was around, accommodation was around 70. Now we had 2 retreat centers that were outliers, and that was the Omega Institute, which is based in Massachusetts, in New York, Rhinebeck. And then the other one was, let's see, what was the name of that? Omega serves about 15,000 participants and have, yeah, I know, it's pretty big. And the other one is the Vida Maria Educational and Spirituality Center. Ben, where are they located?
They're located in Villa Maria, PA, right near the Ohio border.
Great, thank you. And those retreat center, the Villa Maria Education Spiritual Center serves about 10,000 people, okay? And when we accounted for those 2 centers, most of the average retreat centers serve about 1,952 participants a year. Now, these retreat centers run the gamut in terms of what they offer in terms of retreats and in terms of formation. So we have everything from personal development to yoga to experiential learning to different spiritual tradition, some with a strong social justice component, some with more of a spiritual component, some with both. So we really ran the gamut. You know, we also noticed that in terms of the retreat center's predominant population served and predominant stakeholders, they were predominantly white. Okay, which was something that was noted in the chat earlier. And out of our 24 respondents, about 16 or about 50% were had predominantly white staff. Right. And most of them also have predominantly white board member. Only about 12 of the retreat center, and also 12 of the retreat center also had about more than 50%. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, we were not able to give you like 68.2% because the way that we did gather the data, it was in ranges. So that's why I'm speaking in ranges, but over 50% were predominantly, volunteers were predominantly white, and also their guests. So when we dove a little deeper in terms of BIPOC, meaning Black, Indigenous, Asian American, Latinx, some of the groups that had the highest participation in some of the retreat centers were African Americans or people from the African diaspora. And by African diaspora, meaning like Afro-Caribbean, et cetera. And these estimates were about just under like 1% with 20 of the center's participants. And it ran across really all of the category. One that couldn't even be accounted for because the range was we just couldn't even accommodate. It was really like Native Americans participation in retreat centers. These were, like less than 0.1%. So any questions so far? Are you surprised by what I'm saying? No? Yes, Sonia, you raise your hand.
Hey. Well, one thing that that brings to mind for me, and maybe this is a little bit specific to the Buddhist context, but when we think about, because we've been talking in our discussions on equity and inclusion and diversity about first generation American immigrants from different parts of the world and how they have or haven't been felt welcome in the context of retreat centers. And it varies a lot depending on the country or the culture that people are coming from. So that's kind of another layer of it that we've been thinking about too.
Can you share more about that? Because it really is applicable to what we're talking about. Yeah. And also when retreat centers, when you're thinking about who are you the next generation of people you're going to be serving and who you're going to be developing relationships, this piece is really critical.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, there's so much to say about this, but I think when we look at Southern Dharma at the full spectrum of what, say, Buddhist practice and teaching involves, we realize that over time at retreat centers, specifically at standalone retreat centers, that there's been a form of Buddhism kind of in Buddhist practice that's been privileged in regards to noble silence, and having kind of a one-off retreat model and it not being community-based, but just people registering individually. All of these things have contributed to creating an environment in which predominantly white people feel most comfortable. And so it's not just, what do we do in general, but it's even like the finer points of what it is that we offer as an experience. So when we think about what is a retreat, why is it interesting? Or why practicing in a different way. And so, I know there's a lot here. It's so interesting, but just noticing that there's a lot of nuance within it too.
Right. this is so juicy what you're just bringing up right now. I have a lot to share around that, but I want to see if anybody else has anything that this what Sonia just brought up is sparking, or from what I shared on the data. Oh. Arlene, I see you. Are you were you gonna say something? No, okay, good. All right, let me just say that this question around what is the intention of retreat center is a real important question, right? Because when we look at the changing demographics, when we look at the changing culture, when you see like what's happening, that is a question that we need to keep asking, right? What is the purpose of retreat center? And has the purpose changed? And if it has, then how can retreat center meet the current need, right? Because even when we have different approach or different perception of what retreat centers are and what can offer, there is this space that can get created where even if we don't hold, like say, noble silence to continue on the Buddhist path here, if we're not about retreat center being quiet spaces for noble silence, there's spaces we can create spaces within retreat centers where everyone can be welcome, where you're not creating just one template that applies to everyone. Like there's ways to get different people's and different groups' needs met within retreat centers while maintaining the vision of retreat centers. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue a little bit more with the data, because this has to do just in terms of differences, right? One of the things that we found was, for instance, for the LGBTQ and questioning folks, right? We have, there were only 2 centers that had 25% or more staff, and 5 centers that had 25% staff and board members, and about 25% volunteers that belong and identified within the LGBTQI community. And there were about 3 centers that said that they had guests that belonged to those groups and felt welcome at their centers, right? So what happened to the others? And this is a small sample, but it's a microcosm of a macrocosm, right? Most of the respondent were cisgender women. Right? And someone mentioned, I mean, even when we look around right now, how many male identified folks are in this call, right? So retreat centers have also been a place that have predominantly catered to cis presenting. And for those of you that don't understand what the word cis is, it's a word that means that your external presentation adheres to your internal, right? So if you say cisgender male, it's like someone presents as a man and also feels that they're a man, as opposed to a transgender person or someone who presents female, but inside feels male, right? There were about 5 centers that say that they were with about 25% or more low income staff. And there was another percentage that we were not able to account for that said that most of their board members, about 25% of their board members came from low income communities. We also saw that the age, and you kind of noticed that before, that the highest ages that are represented in retreat center tend to be between 41 to 60, and then 61 plus in terms of both in staff and volunteers and participants. So when we look at the age and we look at the population, what are you able to infer from that? Ben, I see you. Talk to me. Let's talk to the group. Actually, don't talk to me. Talk to the group. What are you saying? I mean,
It's reminding me of other conversations we've had recently about the, what is it called? The nonprofit industrial complex that
mm,
arose out of wealthy white women spending their time with good intentions to help the world. But then when other folks want to help the world, the system is all set up in a way that makes it very difficult. And so it's actually a form of privilege to be a part of this group to help the world within the nonprofit sort of structure. And so I'm thinking about how retreat centers have had their privileges that have made it really limiting for people who are not from that background to have the same rest and renewal and transformation often, and that the data is kind of showing this limitation.
mm. Thank you, Ben. Anyone else want to chime into that?
Well, another thing is that there are just a lot of boomers. There just are a lot of them. So like they're still that generation is still so dominating so many of our cultural and spiritual institutions. And so that's just an overall demographic effect that's happening as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Ben. Anyone else? I'll invite a boomer to speak to what's being said.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Sonia a little bit more, to speak a little bit more about that. For some reason, it made me feel like, felt like the boomers were part of the problem from what I heard from your description.
Yeah, that wasn't in my words, nor was it in my intent. It
Okay.
may be that there's a general feeling in our society that boomers are under attack. I'm not denying that there's a general sentiment that's shared by a lot of people, but that was not what I was saying at all. It was really just the wave. It's just we have to recognize that there's a lot more people of that generation than there are, for example, of my generation or anyone near it. And that creates its own effect. It's just a lot more people. So that, for example, people who are in their retreating years, in their retirement years and beyond, when they have a lot of time and perhaps the resources to be able to come on retreat, their energy and their needs and their interests tend to dominate the space just naturally, just by virtue of numbers alone.
We're not going to be around much longer. So I'm we're kind of leaving it to the youth and the mature youth to fix this. So I hope that before we're all gone, that we can, at least some of us can see that we're working together. Collectively, the whole, young and old. Anyway, thank you for explaining, expounding on that. Thank you.
Thank you both. Jean, just a moment. I'm going to share this, and this is a piece around boomers and millennials, right? And that is that because a lot of the institutions have been shaped by the boomer generation, right? And we're trying to shift the way the institutions have excluded and also disenfranchised some folks, right? It also is not lost on me that is really important, because I'm 56. And before coming into this position, I was working for an organization called Young Women Empowered. And that organization was working with young women between 13 and 19. And that they moved it up to 26. But I had to really look at, how do I move from being in the forefront of this organization's leadership into being a good elder? And the thing is that this culture doesn't really, at least from my perspective, doesn't really take care of the elders in a healthy way. And it also doesn't help the elders to learn to become elders. Like, it really what it does is just makes old, when you're old, you're just old. And when you're old, you're like trying to fight. Every message is saying that you're old and you're useless and you're not of value, and that you really your ambition should be to become young, right? And so because of that, there's this constant struggle between trying to be of service, and then at the same time, people who are younger saying, well, how could you be of service? Because you haven't been really taught how to be of service without taking power and control. And this is something I've seen in a lot of organizations, and this has gone across race. This is not about, this particular issue is not a racial issue. I see it in some of the young people that have worked with in Seattle, where the young people be like, we want to push for this change and we want to move this change forward. And some of the elder be like, no, this has to be slow and incremental, but in a way that's really because they don't have the energy to really like move the agenda forward. So it's really about like taking it slow and still maintaining the same structural systems of oppression. And we haven't really have really strong models for intergenerational leadership and intergenerational cooperation. And so I'm really grateful to both you and Sonia and Gail for raising this up, because retreat centers that are being predominantly led by elder white folks need to figure out a way to share leadership and power with the younger generation to be able to move things forward. Okay, I'll get out of that soapbox. Jean, your turn.
Well, I thank you for getting on that soapbox. I really appreciate that. And I think one of the challenges in our world, which is not what I really want to talk about, is that we stress independence and not interdependence. Yep. And we are not good at learning how to ask for help and be interdependent. And what I want to address is something different, which is there's a saying around the autism community that when you meet one autistic person, you meet one autistic person. I think that is also true in the retreat community. When you meet one retreat center, you've met one retreat center. We have various histories, we have various formations, we have various stories to tell. And all in retreat centers are very different. Yes, we have, some of us have land, some of us don't. But the one that I represent doesn't come out of this idea of going on retreat for rest and renewal. It's about going on retreat to be part of a movement to change society. And that is a very different description of why this place exists. And I just want to lift up that as you went through what the statistics were, right? Every one of those has a different face, a different story to tell, a different reason to fight for its existence. And yet we're all bonded. Because in some ways we're trying to change the world. And I'm very grateful for this work that you're doing, Victoria, with all your allies and people who are going to come and teach and facilitate.
Thank you, Jean. I'm going to pass it over to Jane Maria. Jane, go
Okay,
for it.
it's Jane Marie, and I am from Villa Maria. But I just wanted to share, this is a perspective on staff and the diversity in terms of age on staff. We had a young gentleman who worked here for 11 years, a tremendous person. A welcoming, did programming. And so as we were doing planning, I sat down and talked to him and said, are you looking that when I retire, you may or would take over? And his response to me was, this ministry is not, he has 3 children. This ministry is not conducive to family. And because of the tremendous time commitment and the tremendous diversity of time that has to be devoted. And so ultimately he left. He said to me, I'll be leaving before you leave, because my children are at an age where I want to spend time with my children, and I can't do that and do this ministry. And what that kind of has said to me is that we really need to look at restructuring the way we do things if we are going to welcome a diversity, especially an age diversity of people in leadership. So I just share that as my experience, recent experience.
Thank you, Jane. That's beautiful and so poignant, that story. Who else have anything they want to share around that? Sonia, I want to go back to you. How are you feeling right now? What's happening?
Oh, it's interesting to me. I think it's great. And I find all of you so inspiring and compelling.
Great, thank you. Just want to check in. All right, let's go back to and Ben, please just give me heads up on time if I start running.
Okay, we have another 45 minutes in the call here.
Okay, because we do have a piece that Jenyng wants to present around data audit. Okay, so let me just go back here and find my place. So what we found was that from these 14 retreat centers that actually from all 24 retreat centers, what we found is that they wanted to, they incorporated race and equity into its mission, its values, and other retreat center statements. So we had a scale from 1 to 5. And it's about 4.5% of the retreat centers said that they had those statements. However, what we found is that they had, when it came to an actual work plan, that a lot of them did not have an actual work plan to help them move that that vision and that value forward. They when we looked at the retreat center had like a benchmark and to work towards the leadership and professional development and retention of staff, like in your case, Jane, that they didn't have a plan. About 2.7% said that they did not have a plan. And then when it came to also particularly around volunteers and people of color, that was even lower. They just did not have a plan for how to create a pathway for volunteers or for people of color in their organization to be able to move forward. And I want to go back and echo what Jean said in terms of like, when you have like each retreat center has a unique marker and it's a unique experience. And that's why when we're starting to engage with the retreat center specifically, we're doing listening sessions to find out even more detail about what's happening in that specific community. We aggregated the data, but we also have the data by retreat centers so that, we're looking at patterns. And sometimes you can make recommendations and make some ideas, assumptions based on the aggregate data, but definitely we have to go deeper into that data and deal with retreat centers, individual centers. When we talked about, does the retreat center has internal hiring policies that address hiring inequalities and promote outreach, recruitment, and retention of marginalized communities, specifically communities of color? Again, no, very little plan, about 2% said that they disagree, they don't have a plan. So it was between like neutral, which or disagree. They all, 4%, which is, strongly agree. 4% said that they had they had a, they acknowledge the contribution that's made by staff and volunteers and leadership towards the creation of an anti-racist and pro-equity environment, and are inherently valuable to the mission and success of the retreat centers. So I'm going to stop there for a minute because there's a lot more to kind of digest, and we can actually share this data with all of you. We have already, and Ben have been sharing it with everyone who, you already sent that out, right, Ben? With everyone who participated.
I haven't sent out the analysis that was done after we received the survey, but for centers who are already involved, they received a PDF of their own data. I'm waiting for the public version of the analysis to go out. So yeah, which I'm happy to do.
Yeah,
if you have it ready now, yeah.
Yeah,
great.
we'll definitely we'll send it out next week so that you can actually have all of this data, because this is when then you can look at both the aggregated data and also the individual data, and then you can start making some changes. Because the thing is that there's two approaches in terms of really shifting this work around equity in the retreat centers. You need to really realize that we are living in a context that has created this environment, regardless of which retreat center you're in, right? You've been in this context. And now we have to look, and we did this so beautifully at our retreat center, our retreat gathering for the co-consultant, when we actually went through and mapped out all of the things that we're seeing right now in the world. Everything from the increase of white supremacist group and neo-Nazi groups, the increase of conflict, not only in our society here, but also globally, the increase of polarization that's happening worldwide, right? To the wealth inequality that exists, to the climate change, to, you know, just all of the challenges that we're facing. We mapped it out, and we'll also maybe share that in the future so you can see. And then we said, okay, what are some of the pieces in the center? And this is what each of you are going to have to really look at. If we're saying retreat centers can no longer be a place when people just go away, but it's more of a place, it can be a place where it's permeable, where the retreat center are actually serving the evolution of society. If we're saying the people that are coming to retreat centers are not the privileged people, this place can no longer be just for people who have the time and money. If we're saying that, then we need to say, okay, what are the changes that we need to make here, that regardless of whether we get one more cent, that we're gonna shift it. What is the shift that we need to make? When we look at who's coming, can we look at the community around us? Can we have a conversation with some of those leaders and say, you know, we're gonna have this retreat happening. We have 70 beds, and we're gonna have this retreat happening that's gonna have 25 beds. We are still going to have to provide for the housekeeping. We're still going to have to provide for the heat. We're still going to have to cook. Can we bring in 10 more people from X community to come and do their work? And not as defined by us, but as defined by them, their work. Right? So we have to become really creative. Anyway, okay, I said enough. Let's hear from you. Jenyng, you want to add something to this conversation, my dear?
Yes, I actually have a question. I'll put it in the chat, and I'm debating whether it's a qualitative or quantitative. Your personal data, Cake Victoria, is I'm curious for y'all, how do you find yourself and your center in this landscape that Victoria just shared through that Racial Healing Initiative survey? And I'm curious, maybe in terms of percentages, just in the chat, like, does it 80% represent you? Does it 25% represent you? Does it 100% represent you? I think it's also interesting that out of 200 centers that this was sent out to, or 200 emails that was sent out to. Ben, you'll have to correct that for me. 24 responded. So that in and of itself is information as well. There's so much rich, thank you, Sonia, to get a sense of like sort of how we're represented in this room, in this space.
And you know what, Jenyng, what I'm going to do too is take a little bit of what you asked, and I'm going to ask Jenyng to break us up randomly. We're 27, so maybe into groups of 4. And let's and keep Jenyng and myself out. I don't know, Ben, if you want to stay out. And then let's go ahead and have that conversation about what's happening in your retreat center within your group. And we're going to do like maybe 5 minutes, 8 minutes.
Victoria, were you speaking to me or Jenyng?
Yes, Justine.
And how many people in each room?
4.
Okay. We're just going to make it a nice 6, and we're going to open the rooms. And Victoria and Jenyng, if you could, we'll try and have you pop out for a second.
Yeah. And if you're not running a retreat center or a board member somehow affiliated to a retreat center, just feel free to share from your own experience of what you're seeing, and also how retreat center could perhaps serve you. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a rich conversation. Did someone was someone in the middle of sharing that didn't get a chance to finish and would like to finish? And just open your mic if there was someone in that position.
I can maybe say something, Victoria, quickly.
Yes.
Finish my for a Commonweal. The question was asked by Marissa of me, how did we go about a Commonweal to increasing the number of BIPOC people, Indigenous people on our retreat center? And I was starting just to say very pragmatically, it started with a relatively new executive director, Oren Schlossberg, who identified, picked, made the connections with a much broader based community of color than we have intentionally invited before. And I stress the word intention because it didn't just happen, was invited to include much greater presence at our large gatherings 2-3 times a year, which then grew into an intentional program for activists, social justice workers, people of color throughout the year to do individual retreats funded by a relatively small amount. And it's literally very down to earth, uncomplicated to go out one by one person and invite them to bring in their people to do work. And we have much distance to go to do this more, but it's been a joy to participate in and see this work happening. And we've also added more programs that we're the fiscal sponsor of, specifically focused on this racial healing work. So that's part of it.
Thank you, Jennifer. I would love to add something to that, and that is that when during the pandemic,
including you,
that is true, including me. In all this full disclosure, I definitely am. I'm employed at Commonweal, and I'm part of the leadership stewardship group there. And part of it too was that Oren and Michael Lerner, Oren Salzberg and Michael Lerner, when Oren first started at Commonweal, Michael thought that he had to leave, that he had to just disappear in order to create space for Oren. And they worked on their relationship and they worked through it so that Michael didn't have to leave. Michael now is doing his own projects and doing his thing. But Oren is very much the leader of Commonweal and running the organization. But then at the same time, Oren is not running Commonweal himself. Oren has developed a group of people myself included, that are in the leadership team. And so we're informed the direction of Jennifer's part of that team as well. But ultimately, if rubber hits the road and things have to be, some decisions have to be made, Oren, it goes back to Oren. But we all have, you know, we hold a stake in the organization. And that's a way that also people are beginning to move in terms of holding power and really looking. I know that the Retreat Center collaboration is in the process of looking at what kind of model they want to use in terms of stewarding this organization. And they're looking at different forms. So that is something that's shifting. So that is this whole idea in retreat center, in organizations in general, of having the single leader that has been usually the charismatic leader, you know, the one with all the network, all the connections to the resources. That single leader that model is outdated, and it's a recipe for burnout. And it really puts too much burden on just this one individual. So we're part of shifting that model at Commonweal, and actually in all organizations that I'm involved with right now, that's the model that we're looking at, and we call it liberatory power. So, okay, so does anyone else need to add anything that was shared in the small group that you would like to bring to the larger group? Anyone else? Okay, going once. Go. Jean?
I'll just chime in here. As we talk about racial healing, and we were talking in our small group about the community outside the retreat center, so the local community, and how much work there is to be done. You know, this is a perfect place for collaboration for several retreat centers. And I would, in my group, it happened to be everyone but me was in a Catholic retreat center, I think, to get together so that they can talk cross community and get inspiration from each other and ideas from each other and share struggles, so that it's not just always in our communities, but actually really let's take advantage of this collaboration and learn from each other and get some hints along the way.
Cool. Thank you, Jean. So on that note, I am going to turn it over to Janine, who's going to take us into the next piece of this work. Go for it, Janine.
Thank you, Victoria. So I just want to notice and name this particular session was really designed for the headspace. When we talk about data and when we talk about analysis, we really start in the headspace. And in racial healing work, we differentiate between head, heart, and hands. And they're independent, but also interdependent, right? We need the practicality of how we might navigate and make decisions, break down barriers, identify structural and systemic racism, anti-oppression modalities and strategies. But it comes from the heart space of the essence, the sort of connective tissue of all our centers of creating change in the world for human thriving. And then it requires us to actually do the work. And what does that look like? From the, as I mentioned in my, French explicative, I won't repeat it again, but the messiness of the work, as we'll call it. And so what I wanted to share that is aligned with this data work survey that we've done is actually sort of a gem of a nugget that happened with the RHI team when we were on retreat. We were having a conversation about actually Arlene, who's on this call, did a beautiful presentation, not only beautiful, but deep and challenging on the color of wealth. And as we grappled with statistics and data we're familiar with and open into a qualitative conversation of what it means, this sort of provocative idea of what I'm going to call, for the RHI team, we've decided to land on this name, a structural racism audit. And we just want to, I just wanted to share a story where this comes from, because since last year, for the past 7 years, 2014 to 2021, I was the operations and finance director at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center in Northern California. And at that time in 2014, the organization was about 20 some years old. And they were about to do a big capital campaign. They were, founded like most mission-driven organization that I've experienced, and it's very few, so I'm just noting my limited data there. But mission-driven people who were friends, who came in and said, let's do this, and made it happen, bought land and created a center, a learning center that then opened up as a retreat center as well. In 2014, and that was 1994. So in 2014, they realized they needed to hire someone who had the financial acumen to understand audits, because now they were going to go over that threshold. A lot of you may be familiar with this running centers, that 2 million threshold in revenue. Now you have to do financial audits. And also there was the lease agreement with the intentional community and the 501c3 that was leasing the land. And all of this brought me into there to look at it as a finance and ops director. What's interesting about this story is, for the first year, myself and the ED, we really looked at a 10-year history of the organization's financials. And I learned so much from that 10-year history, just in the numbers. So this idea of, or this approach of narrative in the numbers and looking at it in terms of patterns, to really allow one to go into a line of inquiry. And as I feel myself getting a little philosophical, I'm going to bring myself back down to my head and my hand space to say that we talk a lot about, or I hear a lot of talk about, making the invisible visible. And this is where I get excited about this idea of, and again, it's just an idea right now, of a structural racism audit, because what we haven't connected when we talk about structural racism and systemic racism, what are we actually talking about? How is it that we find ourselves talking around it? What's the obstacle that's getting in the way? And maybe because I come from a very financial lens, I was like, what if we used our numbers to look at how the world has shaped how we actually have built our structures? So it's more of an opening of what are the systemic racism out in the world that we actually have unconsciously adopted or am complicit to, because we haven't connected what every human being, if you want to get to know them, you look at their use of resources, time and money, right? And there's no right or wrong about this. There's no judgment. It's really, I was talking to another friend this morning. We were talking about like going into Social Security and looking at our history of income and expenses. What story does that tell about us, our priorities? So the one other thing I'll add, and then I'd love to break us out again and just sort of sit with this and have conversations with each other, is in reading the racial equity assessment and how Victoria shared it as I was listening to it. It was really two camps. The pieces of the assessment that were strong were making statements, generating ideas. And I think there was a third one here of acknowledging contributions of staff and volunteers. And then if I look at what was shared in terms of what were the challenges, they were more of the practical things of the difficulties of having an equity plan, benchmarks, internal hiring processes and policies, explicit practices, analyzing the racial disparities, and taking racial equity principles into account. And so this idea of how do we go from that head space, how do we go from our heart space into our head and our hand space to do this work? And so it's just a curiosity and an interesting line of inquiry of, again, doing something for the team of thinking through connecting two disparate pieces, money, finances, and mission. And what would happen if we brought them together? So with that, shall we, Justine, maybe we can break out into same number of groups and maybe different people and just share reflections, how this is landing on you in your body. Victoria, did you have something or?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Justine added like maybe 3 more minutes or 4 minutes or something so that people can also have a little potty break. I don't know if people have had any opportunity to go and just take a little break and get some water or stretch a little bit, whatever you need, and then come back to the group.
So Jenyng, how much time would you like? And then we'll add a 3-minute in that group bio break.
Okay, and were we doing 4 people?
Yeah, some things have shifted. So there's several, the majority are 3 people and 2 groups of 4.
How about 10 minutes?
Let's do a total of 13 minutes. So you'll be whisked away and then have a couple minute break, and then the invitation to think about how your body is with this content. And Jenyng, was there a second question?
No.
The other question, but Jenyng, the other question is, how is this showing up in your retreat centers?
Yes.
What are some of the structural pieces in your retreat centers that you're shifting?
Right. So we'll stop recording. Ben is doing the breakout rooms. Thank you, Ben. And we'll see you back in here in about 13 minutes.
All right.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. I'm just seeing if there's any others. Justine, is there anyone else in breakout? No. Okay. So some folks probably had to drop off for other meetings, but welcome back. We'd love to take a moment to harvest with each other what was shared, what was learned, and just open this space up. And I think, so in terms of the prompt again, how was the conversation showing up in your body, in your retreat center, and what are your retreat center, the kinds of work that you're doing to break down these structural and systemic racist issues? When you think of harvesting, I find in service of is always a helpful frame. So as you find words difficult to access, okay, I will get right to you, Sonia. As you find words that are difficult, now I'm going to ask you to tap into your heart space and hold this community as a body and reflect on what feels wanting to be shared for the benefit in service of each other, as Jean mentioned, building this community and learning from each other. So that might be a helpful frame as we find our voices. And again, there are no right or wrong answers here. This is a learning journey. Sonia Marcus.
I was kind of conscious of feeling like I was taking up a lot of space at this meeting, but I did hear some really, really interesting things in my group. And it also was clarifying for me in regards to a very specific issue that we're dealing with, which is power sharing with the younger generation. and specifically in regards to board membership and these kinds of things, and realizing that like this was kind of the thing that was most on deck for us right now as being kind of a structural issue to deconstruct, because this was going to be the pathway toward us being able to then access issues around persons of color and, you know, people who don't identify in the dominant kind of way at our center, but that this issue of power sharing with younger people is just, it's very alive right here. And it's something that I think is kind of in some ways where we need to, or at least I feel compelled to kind of like place a lot of energy there right now, because I feel like that's going to help us break other things down kind of. So I appreciated the opportunity to share with other people, though. It's really, really interesting.
Thank you, Sonia.
And how it kind of shows up for me, Arlene, I'm with the Poor Handmaids of Jesus Christ. We're in Plymouth, Indiana. They've always had at our retreat center, which is the Lindenwood Conference and Retreat Center, a scholarship, and it's called the Gift of the Spirit. And it was being used kind of willy-nilly, you know, in terms of folks that, one thing is that the application that we have for the scholarship was so detailed around like people's income and all just weirdo stuff that I was like, why the fuck are we even asking? Sorry, excuse me, like, why are we asking for this information? It's a scholarship. If it's a scholarship, let it be a scholarship. You know, it's not, you know, it's like, it's not espionage because somebody's going to come on retreat kind of deal. So that was one thing. The other thing for me was I was very intentional in saying that we're going to change the advertisement of it and say, Gift of the Spirit Scholarship, especially for BIPOC individuals. That's first. And then it's especially for caregivers. And we were in the midst of COVID. So, you know, anybody on the front line, like really being a lot more intentional, because if the money's there for us to offer this, and we are just not even, you know, saying up front, really, really, truly, this is what the scholarship is for. I felt like that was this language and a push that I had to move in terms of our retreat center, thinking outside of the same people that come, the same Catholic groups that come, and just moving them in a very different kind of direction. And it's still a struggle. It literally is still a struggle to try to get people of color to even take advantage of the scholarship. And another piece of that too is this challenge that I have in terms of how do we say it's a scholarship, but then we're like, well, they should be able to pay something. We just want them to be able to pay something. And I'm like, but why? What difference does it make if we truly are trying to engage people to be in this beautiful space and place that we have to transform themselves, and we know it's available? Why are we putting these stipulations on it in terms of how it gets utilized? So that's my soapbox. I'm gonna be done.
Thank you, Arlene. I think that was great modeling of, again, unpacking the what that we do to understand the why that we do it and the gaps it identifies that then we can refine to then say, actually, we're missing this piece, or we need to be more expansive, or where can we be creative? But it has to start with the good discomfort of looking in, just much like I was just saying this to Ben, much like we go to retreat to do our heart work, right? We go deep, we open, we unpack. Such the same way we need to look at our structures and systems and not be afraid of that. Yes, please keep it going. Yes, Maureen.
I use the word constricted, but at the same time, kind of also feeling in my body a a new kind of freedom about what could happen if we really started looking more closely at the sources of the money, and also just what could be done. The Franciscan Center for 46 years welcomed the LGBTQ community, and our new bishop has decided we shouldn't do that anymore, that it's up, and he's really not in charge, but the board president bowed to him because the previous directors have just said, yeah, we're a Catholic retreat center, but we're not under the bishop. But so 46 years worth was cut off. But I do think we've done better in terms of representation on the board, et cetera, but not BIPOC people. So that would be another place to look at, how do we decide who's on the board? And then to keep trying to offer things in programming that can at least appeal to people to come and learn more about the whole issue. So those were some of the things that, and not worry about how many come, you know. So that was a good thing for me to hear.
Thank you, Maureen.
If I could just add to that, in our group, we talked about the importance of not just trying to even out the playing field and not just acknowledging the structural racism, but also the importance of understanding the culture that these groups will be coming and joining in the retreat centers. You can't cater something to someone or retreat or a program to something that you think they might need if it's not within their culture to be able to attend such a program. And I think that for a lot of our retreat centers, I think we're coming in from that perspective of wanting to offer programs to the people without really understanding the cultural component and implications that involves. I think that's really important. You know, you don't just want to welcome someone in because you want to diversify, but you really have to understand where that diversity comes from.
Thank you, Yolanda. Yes, Dr.
You
Myra.
read my mind. That is why I raised my hand. Because, well, first, let me just really share that I'm so grateful that this survey and study was done, because it is so necessary. And I share this with Victoria, and for the retreats to really be relevant to the need. So if we're bringing in more people of diverse backgrounds, it really needs to have that honed in on specifics so people at least have somewhere to start. But kind of piggybacking on what Yolanda said, and I had mentioned this in the last breakout, is how we can really get more involved in the community, like literally connecting with organizations that have the very things that we feel our retreats need. So the multi-generational piece, the LGBTQ plus, the BIPOC, to reach out to these organizations in the community and start having conversations and to actually invite their organizations on campus, you know, and literally having, you know, these leaders who have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the community. They can gather information from the people in the community, what their needs are. They can bring that to the table. So that can be part of the discussion for any type of program development, and very well can contribute to some type of committee that is community outreach. It could even be a consultant for the board, and potentially getting some people added to the board. So it's really the relationship of how do we connect, just not to, okay, how do we get more people into our centers or to participate in the programs, but literally to connect with people and find out what their needs are and how can we work together to make sure the community is being served.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
I could just add one other piece to that.
Yes, Yolanda.
I was thinking, just, what I shared in the group was, a lot of the time I think of it, for at least our retreat center, I can speak for us and us only, is a lot of the time we get people come back or are invited into the space through word of mouth. And that's how we get a lot of our participants, a lot of our audience, word of mouth about this was great, this was transformative. But we're only going to be as diverse if we stay in that mindset. We're only going to be as diverse as the circle of people that those individuals relate to. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of diversity in those circles, because we continue to see the same type of group. So if they're not coming to us through our connections, then it's important for us as retreat centers to do the outreach and to, as Ben stated earlier, that all our welcome is not enough. It's about, you belong here too, and being intentional about how we invite people and recognizing all of what that means and all of what that change will mean for the center.
Thank you, Yolanda. I want to get to Sonia, and then if there are others, and then wrap it up with a story.
Thanks. Yeah, just very appreciative of everything that Yolanda just shared. I was just going to say, when I actually applied to be on the board at Southern Dharma originally, before I was ever serving in this position, they didn't know what to do with me for a year and a half, because I was the first person who had come along who wasn't friends with an existing board member before. So they were like, well, who is she? Which is like, big problem. You've got a big problem right there. But what I wanted to share about, like, knowing the culture of the community you're also trying to cater to, right? I just wanted to share something that I shared in my small group, which is that in April, Southern Dharma will be offering the second edition of a meditation retreat that's about transforming racism on the inside and the outside, as a retreat for white people. And that was kind of the way that we approached, like, okay, what is the power of the retreat? What is the power of the retreat center? Let us engage that in the service of anti-racism work. And so we worked with this teacher who's been doing a lot of this work for many, 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 many years, Donald Rothberg, very active white person who's been an activist his whole life. He created this whole curriculum for us that he thinks is the first of its kind. He's actually writing a book about it right now, but about just recognizing that meditation and contemplation are uniquely well-suited tools to the task of actually looking at that micro interior level of what is going on in your body. How are you carrying racism in the body? So let's use what we have as the tools, that we use for our own transformation in our own communities.
Thank you, Sonia. Delivered with such passion. I don't know how to follow that.
Can we say an amen to that?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm going to just pause for a minute, let that live. Speaking of knowing the culture of the community you are trying to support and changing. To just sort of bring this to ground on a practical note, connecting some dots and themes and words that were spoken, collaboration, innovation, mostly creativity, and also in the survey, for example, one of the challenges explicitly was onboarding policy and practices. So the story I wanted to tell was last year at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, right before I left, we had to hire 4 people. We engaged a third-party consultant, and we were playing around with how do we hire differently than how we have been, because a lot of times we get a stack of resumes and we're looking, and again, unconscious bias. We're pulling out names that we think, we're making assumptions of what might be diverse, and we're already with a lens instead of inquiry and data, making assumptions and judgments. And so what we did was we threw that out the window, And we worked with this consultant, and we also pulled ourselves back and said, we're not going to be on our timeline, even though we did have a timeline, to have this, to have all the applications go outside of our institution. And until we hit 25%, and we use that because of what is our current demographics in our region, in our area, until we had 25% of a diverse pool, meaning BIPOC folks in that stack, we wouldn't read one single resume. And so again, none of these are perfect, but I feel like we just entered into a retreat. Like we could continue on another hour or two of just sharing these kinds of stories of like, this is what we tried. These were the challenges. This is where it came short. What other ideas do you have? To be in this regenerative soil of ideation, but also practicality. So in that, it ended up turning what we're hoping to a 4-month hiring process into 6 months. And at the end of the day, fortunately or unfortunately, let's not qualify it, Jenyng, but we ended up hiring, my replacement was a white woman, a cis white woman. Oh no, actually a white woman. And what was really interesting though, was that we knew we had done everything that we could at that moment to think of how to be creative outside the box. And we knew we didn't look at any of those resumes, and we looked at everybody equally, but we made that predetermined. Again, the word intention has come up a lot. Intention that we weren't going to hire or look at anything until we had 25% of that stack of resumes of BIPOC folks. And so, it was a great exercise. And so a lot of the other stories that have been shared here of how people have met these challenges, I hope we continue to build community and have these conversations. That's part of the Racial Healing Initiative, is to work with centers, learn and share and collaborate together. So with that, I will hand it back over to Victoria.
Thank you, Jenyng. Wow, I love it. You know, it just so happens that with workshops, whenever you're getting towards the end, it's like all of the juices starts to flow. So we just have to keep creating more opportunity for people to gather and continue to, share these ideas, because we need to dismantle this thing, right? And we need to do it together. And I just want to say that, for instance, there's the piece around creating assets, and we want to gather, and Ben, this is going to be a task for us to really kind of gather some of the lessons that we're hearing about and create like a database of strategies that retreat centers can take to begin to dismantle some of the structure that has prevented people from all backgrounds and cultures to be able to access retreat centers in a ways where they see themselves represented, because representation matters, in a place where people are not excluded because of their income, all of that, because of their color, their race, gender identity, etc. And that we continue to carve out a space for that, because retreat centers are needed and valuable and important. So there's that. The other piece with assets, which is the place where we can start immediately, I would say, like, for instance, at the Commonweal, one of the things that we're doing was we looked at the schedule and said, okay, well, when can someone have access to retreat here without having the burden of all of this amount of money? And so they looked at the calendar, and Jennifer said, well, let's just choose a week, where people who don't have resources to be able to come, or even if they do, but they haven't traditionally come and we had not in relationship with them, can come. So we found 4 days and created a retreat center specifically for Black women. And so just this weekend, we have about 26 Black women that are going to be coming to Commonweal to be able to rest, recharge, reflect, and it's not going to be at no cost to them, right? So that was the willpower of the leadership at Commonwealth to say, yeah, we want to make this accessible. Now, these are women that are not, all of them are in relationship with me. They're not in relationship with Millicent, who is co-facilitating this, or Lisa, who's currently on the board and she's in Washington, DC. We just kind of invited and then asked them to invite other folks. And so we're these are people that are going to be coming into relationship with Commonweal, but I also have had to be very mindful and very, careful to make sure to create a container in which they're not going to come and also be additionally harmed, right? Where someone is not going to come and be like, well, how are you here? And they might think that being kind of welcoming, but that's also like really like can be really aggressive. And so as you're thinking about wanting to increase access to your retreat center, it is really important that we check the way that we carry internalized dominant patterns in our bodies, like Sonia was saying, in our language, in the images in our centers. So it's really is a deeper inquiry than just saying we want to increase access. So on that note, I think we're going to leave it there, and I'm going to play a song to kind of take us out, and the conversation will continue. We're just going to put a pause on it for now. And here, this is actually, it's kind of a call and response. It is, I'm going to put the lyrics here for everyone to see. Oh, no, I lost the lyrics because I copied the Southern Dharma Center information. So let me just see if I find the lyrics real quick. I'm going to start playing the song, and then I'll find the lyrics for you. Some of you might know this song. The author is unknown, but the person singing it and leading it is Nehemiah Luckett.
Is the same sound as the blood in your body as it moves across your bones. Are you listening? Are you listening? Put your roots down, put your feet on the ground. Put your roots down, put your feet on the ground. You can hear the earth sing if you listen. You can hear the earth sing if you listen. Put your roots down, put your feet on the ground. You can hear the earth sing if you listen. Put your roots down, put your feet on the ground. You can hear the earth sing if you listen. 'Cause the sound of the river as it moves across the stones. 'Cause the sound of the river as it moves across the stones is the same sound as the blood in your body as it moves across your bones. It's the same sound as the blood in your body as it moves across your bones. 'Cause the sound of the river, 'cause the sound of the river as it moves across the stones, as it moves across the stones, is the same sound as the blood in your body as it moves across your bones.
You're muted, Victoria.
Put your feet on the ground, you can hear the earth sing if you listen.
You weren't listening to the song at all?
Yes, yes, yes.
You can hear the
The last part.
sing if you listen.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for that song. Thank you
Bye,
so
Lauren.
much.
Bye,
Bye.
Gail.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Hi, Arlene.
See ya. I'll see ya. I'll see ya.